to talk to you today about the forest and its role in medieval literature and society. The forest was a wild, crazy place where monks would go to meditate and fast, but it was also a dangerous place where spooky, crazy things could happen. And it was a place for hunting and, civilized activities like riding a horse. Forests were a place of mystery. There are a lot of myths surrounding werewolves and monsters, giants, things like that you could find in forests. And in almost every knight story, the knight has to go out on a quest in the forest, and he will come back from the end of this crazy journey in the forest with twists and turns, and he will achieve a much higher status back at court after he's gone through the forest. So the forest has a very interesting place in medieval literature and society. I'm going to show you some cool pictures of the forest. The first one I have is, this is a picture of Hatfield Forest in England. I don't know if you can see it, but it's pretty dense. It's pretty wild. This is an image of deer hunting from the Book of Hours from Tours in France, which is from around 1500. So there's a lot of images in medieval art and literature depicting the forest. Here's the Great Forest of Essex, Hatfield Forest. So you can see some of these forests are not quite as dense as others. They were definitely maintained to some extent because they were used a lot for hunting. This is the Royal Forest of the Peak, which was a gift from William I to William Peveril. It's in the Woodlands Valley. It was part of the Royal Forest. Peveril Castle, Castleton was the administrative center of the Royal Forest. Now, royal forests and king's forests were owned, of course, by the king, and they were restricted to the king's use. Therefore, if you were caught hunting in the king's forest, you could be killed because that was a treasonous offense. So they took their forest very, very seriously. This is another picture of hunting from the Livre de Chasse by Gaston Phébus. So you could see that hunting was a very, very stylized sport. They got all dressed up, their horses got all dressed up. It was a big deal. It was a way of showing off their status, and of course their hunting grounds were very, very prized places. Here's another photo or depiction of the hunting grounds from a manuscript. And I will go ahead and pass along this PowerPoint to your teacher, so if you want to look at any of the references or see these pictures closer, you can. And feel free to ask me any questions about them. Although art isn't necessarily my specialty. Literature is my thing. This is another picture from the Missal à l'usage d'Evreux from the 16th century. This was actually a handbook that explained how to go about doing things like being a knight and hunting and whatnot. This is from the same book, the same picture actually. It's just up close. You can see all the incredible detail. These were hand printed. That some monk or scribe put all these colors on by hand, just the same way that a comic book artist might do today. You can see it's pretty impressive work. This is from the Saint-Gilles Breviary from Langres. A breviary was a religious document that the monks used and created. And here's another from the breviary from Paris, from Saint-Gilles. So that's, again, you see the deer is depicted very often in this art. And so the forest was a place also where criminals could escape, so it could be a scary place. There's stories in romances called the Tenebrous Forest, and there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in the forest. There actually is a story about a werewolf named Bisclaveret. It's one of the Les de Marie de France, which is one of the most famous songs / stories collections from that period. And anybody who studies medieval French literature has got to know about it. It's very famous. You may have also heard of the story of Tristan and Isolde. That was actually a German story, but was turned later on into a Wagner opera. So the story is very, very popular. Wagner loved medieval history stories and romances, so that's why he chose that subject. And Tristan goes into the forest as well and does some shenanigans. And a lot of the stories talk about how the knights go in the forest, and sometimes they'll encounter weird characters. Maybe they'll start acting a little crazy. They might forget to do what they're supposed to do. They might behave in a little more savage way. They may not follow the courtly traditions because they're not at court. They're in the middle of the woods. And a lot of the times they make mistakes in the forest, like they betray their beloved, or they don't wear the right clothes, or take off all their clothes and run around like crazy people. It happened. Yes, this is what the stories are about. So that's why it's really interesting. But then the interesting thing is they come back. They go back to society. They go back to being good knights and respecting their beloved, and usually are rewarded at the end. So that's how the forest is represented, as sort of a temporary space where people can go to get a little crazy, but then come back and get better and achieve a higher status within the court. There's also a lot of nunneries and hermit places in the middle of the forest as well, because of the beautiful scenery and because it was removed from the rest of society. Obviously, you want to keep the nuns and the hermits away from everyone else because they're not allowed to do what everyone else is allowed to do. They have a very specific role in society, and a lot of times people would get sent there not by their own choice, but because their parents had made a promise to someone, or because they couldn't get married, or it wasn't always a place where people went because they wanted to. Although life there was good, you got free beer and everything, but yeah, the monks were actually in charge of all the beer production in most of Europe. They had a monopoly on beer. Little known fact. So enjoy. I hope you learned a lot about forests and medieval society. Maybe you learned something new. And if you have any questions, let me know.